"You've grown into exactly what I wanted," she said, and for a second, the words hung in the air, fragile as the steam rising from my coffee. I couldn't answer right away. My throat was too dry, and the quiet hum of her kitchen made every little sound feel like it was echoing inside my chest. She leaned against the counter, one hand brushing absent-mindedly along the edge, eyes scanning the mug in front of me as if reading it could tell her everything about me. I wanted to reach out, to touch her hand, but my own hands felt heavy and useless in my lap. Her name was Claire, though everyone around the building called her the neighbor's sister, because she'd lived here for years before I even moved in. I remembered her from before, of course, her laughter echoing down the hallway when she visited her brother, the way she always seemed to notice things I didn't. I never imagined a moment like this, sitting in her apartment alone, that she would say something so personal, so piercing, without even meaning to. I cleared my throat. Thanks, I said, but my voice came out smaller than I wanted. She tilted her head, one eyebrow raised, the faintest smile touching her lips. There was a pause, long enough for me to feel like the world had narrowed down to the two of us and the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Claire was in her mid-40s, but there was something in the way she moved, an easy grace, the subtle curves of her body, the way her hair caught the light, that made her presence feel impossible to ignore. And yet, there was something softer underneath it all. A vulnerability she didn't show anyone else, something I was suddenly aware of in a way that made my stomach twist. I tried to focus on the room. The way the late afternoon sunlight fell across the counter, warming the faintly chipped tiles. The smell of vanilla from the candles she'd lit. Even the way the clock ticked on the wall felt loud, somehow. Every detail seemed amplified because she was here, watching me, and I couldn't look away. "I wasn't expecting this," I said finally, because I had to say something, anything, to fill the space. But the words felt hollow. She laughed softly, almost like a sigh, and shook her head. "You never do you?" she said, and there was a teasing edge in her voice, but also something else, a quiet sadness I couldn't place. I watched her then, the way her fingers absent-mindedly twirled a loose strand of hair, the slight crease in her forehead, the hesitant way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't noticing. I wanted to tell her everything, to make her understand how long I'd carried this quiet admiration, how seeing her like this made me ache. But words faltered, as always. We stayed like that for a long moment, the kind of silence that isn't uncomfortable but charged, like it could crack open at any second. I shifted in my seat, and our eyes met, held, and then darted away. My heart hammered in a way I'd never known it could. And just as I thought the moment might stretch on forever, the sound of the doorbell cut through everything. Sharp, unexpected. I glanced toward the entrance, my stomach tightening. She froze, her hand hovering over the counter, and our eyes met again, wide and unspoken. Someone was here, or maybe something else had arrived, and neither of us knew what it meant. The silence that followed was heavier than before, and I realized, with a mixture of dread and thrill, that nothing about this afternoon would stay quiet for long. I followed Claire's gaze to the doorway, but it was empty. My pulse slowed only slightly, replaced by the quiet thrum of questions I didn't dare ask. She let out a breath, a little too long, a little too soft, and for a moment, I thought I saw something like relief flicker across her face. "I should have warned you," she said, brushing a hand over the countertop, fingers lingering on the edge. "It's complicated. You probably wouldn't understand." I wanted to tell her I didn't care about complicated. That I had spent years watching her from the hallway, the coffee shop, the park, not caring about risks, only that she existed. But instead I nodded, letting my mouth stay shut. Sometimes words made things worse. Claire had been married once. I knew that. Or maybe more than once. I didn't ask, because I didn't want to pry. There was a softness around her eyes that hinted at regrets, choices she carried like invisible weights. She hadn't always been untouchable in the way older women sometimes seemed, reserved behind polite smiles and practiced distance. And now, in the quiet of her kitchen, I saw her differently, human, imperfect, vulnerable. I shifted in my chair. You never talk about him, I said, though my voice betrayed me, carrying curiosity and an ache I could barely hide. She shrugged, but her eyes darted away, toward the window. Why dredge up the past? It doesn't matter anymore. She let the words hang like smoke, but I caught the tremor in her jaw, the slight tightness in her hands. That's when I realized she wasn't just careful, she was guarding something. Maybe herself. And yet, the way she looked at me now, those brief glances that lingered a second too long, suggested she wanted to let someone in. Someone younger, reckless maybe, someone who didn't know the rules she lived by. I tried to focus on the difference between us, me, barely out of college, still fumbling through life, her, established, experienced, with a life she had built and a history she couldn't escape. That's what made this so risky, so forbidden. The world would never understand. My friends would laugh. Her neighbors would gossip. And yet, my chest ached when she moved closer to the counter, brushing her fingers over the same edge I had been tracing without realizing. Do you remember that summer? I said, almost without thinking, the words spilling out. When your brother invited me over for the barbecue? You gave me that iced tea. She blinked, and then a slow smile crept across her face, warm and hesitant. I remember. You spilled half of it on the deck. Her voice carried that teasing lilt I'd always loved. I laughed softly, the sound low and awkward. And then she did something small but everything. She reached over, her hand brushing mine, just for a heartbeat, and didn't pull away. That fleeting contact set my nerves alight, and I felt the weight of the years and the distance between us shrink, if only for a moment. We stared at each other, neither speaking, and yet the silence between us felt like a promise, or maybe a warning. Either way, nothing would stay the same. The moment her hand brushed mine, I thought the world had slowed. But then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, heart still hammering, and froze. A text from my roommate. Dude, she's here. I just saw her walk in, your neighbor. Don't freak out. I looked up. Claire had turned her back to me, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. My pulse quickened, but not from fear, something else entirely. Guilt? Excitement? I couldn't separate them. You're texting someone? She asked, not turning around. Her voice was calm, but I sensed the edge underneath. I hesitated. Yeah? Roommate. Nothing important. Lies tasted bitter in my mouth. She finally looked at me, eyes narrowing, the corners of her lips twitching. Just that one sound, soft and questioning, and I wanted to confess everything. But I didn't. I couldn't. And then there was a knock. Not at the door, but the elevator. Footsteps. Someone coming up. My stomach dropped. I could feel the weight of the apartment pressing down, closing in. Claire's expression shifted. The teasing, the warmth, the vulnerability, they all vanished in a heartbeat, replaced by caution. Her hand hovered near the counter, fingers gripping the edge. I could read her body like a book. Stop, retreat, don't let this happen. I should probably go, I muttered, though I didn't move. My chair felt rooted to the floor. No, she said, sharper than I expected, and then softer. Not yet. Just stay. The words should have made me feel relief, but instead, they sent a jolt straight through me. Every instinct screamed to close the space between us, to lean in, but something, her hesitation, the invisible lines drawn by life and logic, kept me frozen. My mind raced. What would happen if someone actually walked in? What would her brother think? Or my friends? Would it ruin everything before it even began? And yet I couldn't stop staring at her. The dim light caught the faint lines around her eyes, the way her chest rose slightly with each breath. Every detail seemed alive, electric. I took a breath, trying to gather courage. Claire! I started, voice low. But she put a finger gently on my lips, stopping me mid-word. Not yet, she whispered, closer this time, her warmth brushing against my hand. Her thumb stroked lightly over mine, slow, deliberate, and I couldn't stop the shiver that ran up my arm. Outside, the sound of a door closing echoed, someone leaving, or someone arriving. I didn't care. All that mattered was the tiny, intimate battlefield in this small kitchen, where our desires and our fears were tangled together like vines. We sat like that, hands almost touching, eyes locked, breaths shallow. Every second stretched impossibly long, and I knew that the next move would change everything. And in the back of my mind, a single, terrifying thought: could we survive this, or would we destroy each other first? The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Claire's words, her hand brushing mine, that tiny spark in the kitchen, it followed me everywhere. I tried to focus on my classes, on the mundane, but every sound, every shadow seemed to whisper her name. By evening, I found myself back outside her door. I didn't even realize I was pacing until I heard her voice behind me. "You're here again," she said, not angry, not teasing, just wary. I swallowed, trying to steady my nerves. I had to see you." My voice cracked. I hated that it cracked. Her eyes softened for a moment, but then something shifted, a flicker I hadn't seen before. Something sharp, possessive, almost painful. "You've changed," she said, stepping closer. "Not just physically. You've grown into someone who draws attention." I wanted to protest, to tell her that none of that mattered, that she was the one I couldn't stop thinking about, but the words caught in my throat. She took a step closer, and suddenly the space between us felt too small, too fragile. "And that bothers me," she admitted quietly, almost a whisper, but I heard it. Every unspoken word hung between us like smoke. Jealousy. Desire. Fear. I saw it all in her eyes, and it made my chest tighten. I didn't know whether I should reach for her or retreat. My heart was a storm I couldn't control. "I don't know what to do," I admitted. The words spilled out, raw and unfiltered. "I can't stop thinking about you. About us. About..." I trailed off, too afraid to say the words that would make it real. She tilted her head, studying me, her expression unreadable. "And yet you keep coming back," she said softly, almost a statement, almost a challenge. I swallowed again, stepping closer without thinking. Her eyes widened, and I froze, realizing that we had crossed some invisible line. My hand hovered, unsure where to rest, on the counter, on the wall, on her. "Claire," I whispered, voice low. My fingers twitched, aching to close the space between us, but fear held me back. She leaned in slightly, just enough for me to feel the warmth of her breath, the faint scent of vanilla lingering in the air. My pulse slammed in my ears. Every rational thought disappeared. I wanted to touch her, to confess everything in one reckless moment. And then she stepped back, just slightly, enough to make the tension unbearable. Her eyes searched mine, holding me accountable for the desire that was now blazing between us. "I can't," she said, voice breaking just a fraction. "Not yet. You don't understand the consequences." I wanted to argue, to beg, but I stayed still, trapped in the gravity of her gaze. The silence stretched, heavy and trembling, charged with everything we hadn't dared to admit. And then, just as I leaned forward, maybe to bridge the last inch, maybe to cross the line I had been aching for, there was a sudden, sharp knock on the door. Both of us froze. Everything hung in the balance: the moment, the words, the desire, the fear. One move and nothing could ever go back to how it was. The knock on the door hadn't been random. My chest sank as Claire's eyes flicked toward it, sharp and wary. Neither of us moved. And then, the handle turned. Her brother stepped inside unannounced. "Hey," he said casually, voice lighter than it should have been given the tension in the room. But the moment he looked at me, something shifted. His eyes lingered a fraction too long, and I realized he had seen everything. Claire stiffened. A flush rose to her cheeks, not anger exactly, but exposure. "I wasn't expecting you," she said, voice tight. Her brother's gaze swept the room, and then back to me. "You two, hanging out?" The words were innocuous, but the way he said them made it feel like an accusation. I tried to smile, to defuse it. Just talking, I said quickly. Coffee, nothing else. But Claire's hand twitched, brushing the counter, betraying her own anxiety. He didn't look convinced. Not even a little. He raised an eyebrow, the kind of look that could unravel anything fragile, anything unspoken. He said slowly. Sure. After he left, the silence between Claire and me was heavier than ever. She sank onto the counter stool, shoulders tight. I could see her trembling slightly, not just from embarrassment, but from the surge of fear that had passed through her. We can't, she said finally, words clipped sharp. It's not just about us. You don't know what it would mean, what people would think. My brother, the building, my life. Everything could. Her voice trailed off, unspoken but loaded with danger. I stepped closer. I don't care what anyone thinks, I said, though the truth in my chest felt fragile. I only care about you. Her eyes welled with something I couldn't name, fear, longing, frustration. And that's exactly the problem, she said. You're too honest, too raw. You don't realize what you're stepping into. I swallowed hard. She had a point. Every inch we crossed, every stolen glance, every fleeting touch, it could undo everything. And yet, the pull toward her was stronger than caution, stronger than guilt. We stood there, inches apart, and I reached out impulsively, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. She froze, and I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd let me stay. Then her phone buzzed on the counter. A message. I glimpsed it. My stomach dropped. It wasn't from her brother. It was from someone else, someone I hadn't considered. Someone who had been watching too. Claire read it quickly, face paling. Her lips parted, a whisper escaping. I thought they didn't know. Her eyes met mine, wide, vulnerable, and something shattered in both of us. What we thought was private, what we thought was safe, was gone. I reached for her hand again, but she pulled back, shaking her head. We can't yet. Not now. Not like this. The room felt smaller, the air thick, and I realized that nothing, no longing, no desire, no whispered words, could protect us from what was coming next. And somewhere deep down, I knew that everything we were building, every stolen glance, every unspoken confession, was about to be tested in ways neither of us were ready for. The apartment was quiet again, but it felt heavier, thicker, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Claire sat on the edge of the couch, knees drawn up, staring at the floor as if it held the answers we both needed. I stayed near the doorway, hands in my pockets, unsure whether to move closer or give her space. I shouldn't have said what I said, I began, voice low. Or come here. Maybe I crossed a line. Her eyes lifted, meeting mine, and for a moment the world outside didn't exist. There was no brother, no messages, no rules. Just us. And that gaze, so open, so painfully honest, made me ache. You didn't cross a line, she said finally, voice breaking, small and human. I let you. I let myself. The confession hit me like a wave. I took a step closer, and this time she didn't pull away. I could feel the heat radiating from her, the subtle tremor in her hands. We had both been circling the same truth for weeks, dancing around desire and fear. And now, finally, it was unavoidable. I've been waiting for this, I admitted, the words tumbling out without filter. Waiting to tell you that I can't stop thinking about you. Not ever. Her breath caught, and she exhaled slowly, as if she had been holding it in for decades. I know, she whispered. I've known for longer than I should have. And it scared me. Scared me because it's forbidden. Because I didn't think someone like you could understand me. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the heater, the faint ticking of the clock. I stepped closer, now only inches away, and lifted a hand hesitantly. She didn't move. She let me, trembling slightly, brush her cheek, trace the line of her jaw. I want this, I said, raw and desperate. I want us. She closed her eyes, letting my hand linger. I want it too, she admitted, almost a whisper. But everything outside this room, it could ruin us. My brother, my life, your future. The words were heavy, real, and possibly human. I nodded, understanding every risk, every potential heartbreak, but unable to care. Not here. Not now. We leaned toward each other slowly, the space between us charged and trembling. Everything felt infinite, the pause, the breath, the way her lips parted as if inviting confession. I wanted to close the distance, wanted to erase the months of waiting and hesitation. And then, she stopped, eyes opening, bright and wary. Not yet, she whispered, soft but firm. We have to be sure. Before anything else. Before it destroys us. I froze but nodded. My hand remained near her face, hovering, a promise unspoken. The tension didn't fade, it thickened, potent and urgent. We understood each other now. Every fear, every longing, every piece of ourselves that had been hidden or broken, laid bare. And yet, nothing had been finalized. No kiss, no decision fully made. Only a shared, trembling truth, that we could not walk away from this, even if the world demanded it. The air between us vibrated with possibility and danger. Everything had changed. And nothing was resolved. But somehow, in that quiet, messy, trembling room, we were together. Days passed, slow and deliberate, and yet nothing had changed, not entirely. We hadn't rushed into anything. No impulsive kisses, no reckless confessions to the world. But every glance, every message, every brief encounter was charged, weighted with all the words we hadn't said and the moments we'd let linger. Claire and I met often, carefully, secretly, savoring the stolen spaces life allowed us. Coffee in the quiet of her kitchen, long walks where our hands almost touched, evenings where we sat together without speaking, letting silence say more than words ever could. The world outside still carried its rules, its judgments, but inside our fragile bubble, time seemed to stretch, pliable and ours. We learned each other slowly. Every hesitation she had, every fear I held, we met gently, without judgment. The awkward silences became comforting pauses. The stolen touches became promises. And in the quiet moments, I began to see her not as the neighbor's sister, not as the woman with a past that frightened her, but as the person who had, somehow, always seen me too. One evening, the sun low and golden, she reached for my hand first. Just like that, simple, unhurried, like we had rehearsed it in our minds 1,000 times. Our fingers intertwined naturally, as if they had always belonged together. I was scared, she whispered, leaning against me slightly. Scared that us, could never survive the world outside. I tightened my grip gently. It doesn't matter, I said softly. Not anymore. We'll figure it out together. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, one that held all the history, the longing, the regrets. I realized then that love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. It was about showing up, again and again, even when the world whispered we shouldn't. We didn't need to rush. We didn't need to fix everything all at once. What mattered was that we were together, messy and imperfect and real. And for the first time in years, we allowed ourselves to imagine a future where we didn't have to hide, where our story didn't need permission. I remember thinking, as we walked back to her apartment that evening, that maybe love was always about the small, quiet victories. A hand held, a look shared, a laugh escaping despite fear. And sometimes, that was enough. I don't know what the next day will bring, or the day after that. Life will still be complicated, still messy. But for now, in this moment, it feels like hope, like a beginning that's been long in the making. And maybe that's the point. That love isn't perfect. It's flawed, it's slow, it's human. And that's what makes it beautiful. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?